Thank you for our panelists. Thank you all. Welcome to the Orleans Citizens Forum, Emergency Preparedness Forum. This forum, by the way, was been in progress for about 6 months. And I think we have to thank Joe Cardito, who is over there. Joe is a PhD engineer with experience in nuclear engineering, and he might want to comment on some of the questions that come up tonight. Anyway, Dr. Cardito's timing for the forum was impeccable. In light of the emergencies we've had just in the past month or so. The bad storms we had in March, where we saw houses along Truro and Wellesley tumbling into the ocean, and of course all the things that went on during the past week that you all know about. Let me say a few words about the Orleans Citizens Forum. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan group of directors who bring issues which are important to the citizens of Orleans. We would like all of you to join, if you haven't already joined, because we do have expenses, renting the facilities, renting the audio and video experts that come, so we can rebroadcast this forum on channel 17 and 18, and also on YouTube. We have advertising expenses, flyers, renting the venue, and that sort of thing. So we would like you to join. It's not much. $15 for an individual membership, and I think we put some of these flyers on every other seat, so please pick one up if you're not already a member. Let me introduce our moderator, and then we'll get right to the business. His name is Kingsley Nelson. He's an engineer. He grew up and lived in Westchester County, New York, graduated from Clarkson University, and spent 46 years in the telecommunications industry, both at Verizon and the Vice President of Marketing and Sales for a major telecom contractor. Many of you probably know him. I think he says he knows half of the people in the audience. He's very active in the community and neighborhood organizations. He has a yacht club, Nauset Neighbors, Nauset Heights Association, the Federated Church, and the Habitat for Humanity. So please welcome Kingsley Nelson. And one more thing, please shut off your cell phones if you haven't already done so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed, very much. As Ed said, it would be greatly appreciated if everybody would have your cell phones off. And also, let me just make the sort of perfunctory statement, housekeeping statements. The exit's right back there, and if anyone needs restrooms, you would go through that door and take a sharp right, and you're down the little hallway right there. Well, as Ed said, the purpose of our forum is to provide you, our citizens, with information about issues that are important to the quality of life of all of us in Orleans principally, but in the surrounding area. Tonight, our objective is to know what to do in an emergency, and to better understand all that comprises emergency preparedness. When many of us hear a forecast of a potential coastal storm, we start thinking about short-term things like, let's get to the store and get more food, locating our flashlight and candles, and checking out fuel for the generator if we're fortunate enough to have one. And we understand, however, that emergency preparedness is really much more than these last-minute activities. We also know that there's a whole bunch of different types of emergencies. There are those caused by tornadoes, although we have been fortunate not to have any out here. Hurricanes, floods, severe thunder and lightning, extreme cold and heat, hazardous chemical and radiological incidents, and regrettably, as we witnessed in Boston last week, terrorism. Well, we have a wonderful panel here today, a very comprehensive group of experts who are going to talk about their areas of responsibility in emergency preparedness, and then later on answer your questions. Now, the way we're going to do this is I'll introduce each panelist who will provide a brief 5-minute overview of his or her responsibilities and role in emergency preparedness for the area. After each has spoken, we'll ask for your questions, and we have 2 roving microphones that we would ask to have you speak up clearly, and I'll try to repeat the questions for everybody. As you can see, Our first panelist is not here. And Senator Wolf is left the State House apparently at 5 o'clock, so he's on his way. We're sure he's going to show up. So what we'll do is we'll proceed the way I just described, and then when he gets here, we'll stop, introduce him. He'll give his 5-minute presentation on his responsibilities and so forth. So we'll skip over him and we'll go first to Deputy Fire Chief Tony Pike. Deputy Chief Pike serves as the Operations Chief Officer for the town, whose duties include emergency response and incident command, as well as overseeing the training and readiness aspects of the Orleans Fire Department. Deputy Chief Pike has over 30 years serving the citizens of Orleans. He is a nationally registered paramedic, holds 2 undergraduate degrees in communications and a master's degree in public administration. Deputy Pike is an instructor at the Barnstable County Fire Training Academy and served as a rescuer at Ground Zero in the World Trade Center in 9/11. He's the manager in charge of the town in an emergency. Do you want to go ahead and...
I think you've said it all, actually. So, thank you very much, King, for that introduction. I do serve as the town's emergency operations manager. My normal job tasks are incident command functions, and my car actually is tasked to go from probably the mid-Harwich area to P-Town for various multi-alarm fires and certain other emergencies, dive emergencies, and technical rescue emergencies. I'm one of the directors of the Cape and Islands Regional Technical Rescue Team. My normal job tasks, my subtasks are training and operations for the town of Orleans fire and rescue function. And when we have a natural disaster, any type of major emergency, which could range from a storm or man-made disaster to a several-day search in either a marine environment or a wooded area, I'm normally tasked with being the incident commander. And there's 3 periods that I typically am responsible for. With a major storm or disaster, I am tasked with the pre-incident preparations for any type of an emergency. Basically, that would amount to 3 things, and as I teach young fire officers, that no matter how big or small an emergency is, 3 things have to take place. And that means that the 3 things are food and water, and a safe place to rest, and sanitary facilities. And it's very much the same with a natural disaster. We have a firehouse that's approximately 25 years old, and it was built for 12 people, and roughly. And when we ramp up operations with my partner agency, and specifically the gentleman sitting next to me, the police chief, we pretty much pack the fire station with at least 35 emergency responders. So my pre-incident functions would be preparing physically, having my staff physically prepare the building with hurricane shutters, food and provisions, and sleeping arrangements for our other emergency, our partner agencies. And then during the operational period, typically our partner agency, the Orleans Police Department, and my staff officers run the emergency function from the Emergency Operations Center, and I'm sure my colleague is going to get into the Emergency Operations Center, so I'll leave that for Chief Mcdonald to flesh out. Once the operational period's over, my other task is to demobilize and make sure that with post-operational meetings and analysis that we have responded to the taxpayer needs and the emergencies during an emergency, during a storm or disaster, that we've responded in an exigent fashion, we've done it efficiently, and that we have kept our responders safe, and that the equipment that the town owns is ready to respond again. So those are the three major tasks. I think that my 5 minutes is probably over about 5 minutes ago, and I'm going to thank you very much for listening to my comments.
Thank you very much. I meant to say also, you did very, very well on that, I'm sure, time-wise, but we have a timekeeper here who will let people know how we're doing, including me. So our next speaker going down the line is Police Chief Scott Mcdonald. And Chief Mcdonald has served the community of Orleans for the past 13 years, starting as a patrolman in 1999 and ultimately being promoted to chief in 2012. Chief Mcdonald has participated in numerous emergency operations, including weather-related disasters, hazmat spills, and other threats to public safety. Chief Mcdonald has a bachelor's degree in law enforcement and is a graduate of the prestigious FBI National Academy. Chief Mcdonald is the Assistant Civil Defense Director for Orleans and Deputy Manager to Chief Pike in emergencies. Chief McDonald.
Thank you, King, very much. I just wanted to bring this in so you could take a look at it. The title, Town of Orleans Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan. Comprehensive, to say the least. One of the documents that we live by in emergency management. It's something that we update continually, and we put a lot of work into this to make sure that the information we do have is accurate and is updated. I wanted to take my 5 minutes and talk a little bit about the Orleans Police Department, who we are, what can we bring to the table to assist the town in these emergencies. We have 21 full-time police officers, very limited resources, without a doubt. We have 4 full-time dispatchers and 1.5 administrative staff. During these events, all personnel, for the most part, are required to work. Typically, what we do is that we will work 12-hour shifts, 12 on and 12 off. Many times, the officers will volunteer to work 16 straight hours. So again, the limited resources that we do have. When there is a forecasted event, your local team gets together. And when I say team, the gentleman sitting next to me to my left, the fire chief, the deputy police chief, Sean Diamond, we get together in the room and we start discussing the potential of, typically it's a storm. What are we going to need to prepare for? Typically that's schedules. As I just said, typically we go with the 12 on and 12 off. There is always someone in the command post at command level, whether that be Deputy Pike, myself, Chief Quinn, or the Deputy Police Chief Sean Diamond. There is always someone at the command level in that command post. The Emergency Operations Center is lacking. It's tight. It's very difficult for us to get the job done, but we come together and do it very well. One very, very important note, and this is rare, folks, this is very rare. The relationship that we have, the police department and the fire department, is very special. We have an outstanding working relationship. And for that matter, that goes for all of our town departments. Excellent working relationship. And essentially what that allows us to do is to provide you with a more effective and efficient service. And I'm very proud of the service that we do provide the citizens of Orleans. A couple of programs and tools I'd like to make note of this evening. One of them is the reverse 911. I'm hoping a lot of you received that over the last Storm Nemo. The contractor we use is Code Red. Essentially, we can send out emergency notifications. And the reason why I brought that up is because I want to encourage all of you, if you have not signed up for the program, please do so. I left some material in the front lobby, which will guide you and direct you on how to sign up for the process, for the program, excuse me. You can also receive notifications on your cell phone. There is additional technology that we're looking into now where you may receive text messages or emails, something that we're looking into, and we'll get back to you on that technology. We'll take a look at the cost and see if it's worthwhile. The other program, let me just give you an example of Code Red. On February 9th, Storm Nemo, we had an emergency notification that was launched at 9:30 a.m. By 10 o'clock, by 10 a.m., over 5,400 telephone numbers were contacted with a 90% success rate. I'm hoping you folks, it was some benefit to you. we received a lot of positive comments on the reverse 911 program. The last program I'd like to mention is the Police Department's Reassurance program, which deals with the safety of our senior citizens in town. Essentially what it is that once you sign up for the program, you call in between 5 a.m. and 10 a.m. in the morning. Once you do that, our dispatcher will check you off the list. If you do not call in between that time, the dispatchers will call you. If you don't answer the phone, we will send the police cruiser to your residence to check on you to make sure that you're okay. Now, I can remember when I was a patrolman in New Orleans and I responded to a woman's house that did not call in and she didn't answer her phone. And I found her injured on the kitchen floor. She couldn't reach the phone. The program works, folks. It's outstanding. And the reason why I'm kind of segueing into this with this forum tonight is that after the last storm, Storm Nemo, we probably had 15 to 20 emergency personnel between the fire department and the police department going out and checking on these citizens. Outstanding program. I left some information out front. I hope you can grab it and take a look at it. If you're interested, please let us know. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next in the middle of the table is Sean M. O'Brien from the Barnstable County Regional Emergency Planning Committee. Sean O'Brien's been the coordinator of this organization since its inception in the fall of 2001. This organization encompasses all of the Cape and the Islands and is an all-hazard regional planning committee. Mr. O'Brien co-authored a regional hazardous materials response plan and is currently assisting in the development of the Cape Cod Regional Sheltering Plan and an expansion of the Cape Cod Emergency Traffic Plan. He's been employed by Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment since 1987 and is an emergency preparedness coordinator and as a coordinator since 2002. He's worked extensively with state and federal agencies throughout his tenure and has extensive training in incident command services. Sean.
Great, thank you, King. Wow. Wow, pretty good. Thank you for asking me here tonight. I've been with Barnstable County for about, I just hit my 26th year. And what my primary function is these days is as the Emergency Preparedness Coordinator. I work for the Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment. We're the Regional Health Department. And you know, about maybe 12 years ago, I was asked by our director to look at the formation of an emergency planning committee. Back 2001, we had not only what happened on September 11th, but we also had some anthrax scares that occurred in the county, actually around the country, but it was something that also hit us a little bit locally here too. As a response to that, the Police Chiefs Association asked our department to look at forming a regional emergency planning committee. And basically what our committee was designed to do and what it was developed to do was to actually address hazardous materials issues within Barnstable County. We did that. We have brought all of the communities in Barnstable County within their SARA Title III compliance. But we also realized that, you know, when we meet, we have representatives from all 15 towns in Barnstable County, from a lot of the environmental agencies, a lot of the emergency management agencies. We also have folks from the island of Nantucket that participate with us. Maybe we should be looking at some other things besides and really starting to develop an all-hazard approach to emergency management. Our goal is not to take over anything for any of the communities, but to assist them in areas where it might be easier if it's done on a regional level. And that was really how we were first formed. It was how to look at regional hazmat emergencies and our hazardous materials users and start keeping track of them. Well, we've also developed into other arenas, and we've gotten involved to some degree with the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency and the Mass State Police when it comes to the Cape Cod Traffic Plan. And then even more recently with the Cape Cod Regional Shelter Plan. About 2005, we had a pretty significant storm affect our region. I think folks here in Orleans remember it because there were a lot of school buses that were under power lines. And we had a lot of power outages that had occurred as a part of it. We saw primarily, primarily 3, 4, 5 days without power, and temperatures dropped below freezing as a part of it. In response to that, we also realized that opening up 32 shelters in Barnstable County was just something that may not work very well. I am a true believer that we have 1,000 volunteers on Cape Cod, and they volunteer for everything. And so to try to open up 33 shelters, which was the number before we reduced to the 6 regional shelters in the program, was really difficult. And so our goal has been is to develop this regional sheltering program for the county. We have 6 shelters. They would be full-service shelters. Some of our partners are here tonight, and they'll discuss that a little bit with you. I think the other thing to talk about a little bit is what we do regionally when it comes to the response to a storm. Quite honestly, about 2, 3, maybe even 4 days out, depending upon the event, we start looking at things and we start actually ramping up. A lot of folks don't know this, but we do, when it comes to resources, we do take a regional approach to working with our agencies off Cape, such as the Mass Emergency Management Agency and the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Every storm, we start to, probably 2 days out, 3 days out, the discussions with the weather, with our weather consultants, it becomes a lot more frequent and a lot more numerous phone calls. We actually look and we start probably getting everybody ready to go into our multi-agency coordination center in about 12 hours before landfall of a storm, 12 to 24 hours before landfall of a storm. What this multi-agency coordination center does, or MAC, as we refer to it, and you may have even read about it in the paper, is that MAC serves as a central point, a clearinghouse, a situational awareness location for us to get an idea of what's going on across the Cape. We monitor power. We run the sheltering program out of there. It's also a location that we are able to keep track of the press and provide our press releases and our situational reports out to everybody. And also what it allows us to do is to actually keep track of what's going on with any resource requests that we may have. So it's something that we've been doing for about 5 years now, and we've had a lot of success with it. So I'm here for your questions.
Thank you, Sean. Our next panelist is Katrina Nash from the American Red Cross. Katrina is a member of the Red Cross Disaster Services as a volunteer and Cape and Islands board member with the experience in emergency response, mass care, and shelter operations. Before moving to Wellfleet in 2003, she was a research scientist and administrator for the Red Cross of Greater Chesapeake and Potomac Blood Services. Katrina has a doctorate in epidemiology from Johns Hopkins University School of Public Health. Katrina.
Hello, everybody. Coming right after Sean, which is very appropriate because it started with the RAPC, and the Red Cross and RAPC worked together for about 4 years, I guess, to come up with a plan which frankly makes us the envy of the rest of the state. And I'm not just bragging, that has been said by many people, including FEMA. We have developed a regional response plan that works, that we plan, that we drill on, and that we have had operational in several instances. I myself was involved in NEMO. I almost said Elmo. At the regional shelter that was held at Nauset High School, and I've been to other shelter operations at Nauset as well. We had almost 200 people. The shelter was open for 3 days. We had a lot of assistance from AmeriCorps, from DART, the animal sheltering people, from the Medical Reserve Corps. We also had assistance from the National Guard at one point because it was a big problem getting around. You all know the trees that were down and the power outages that we had to deal with. So it was quite an experience. That's the largest shelter we've had at Nauset before. Ordinarily, when we'd open Nauset, we'd have maybe 30 people at most. This time, as I said, it was almost 200. And it was a wake-up call, I think, in a lot of ways, because we had a lot of older people, a lot of people with medical needs, which were a little beyond what we had to deal with before. So you know, these plans and these arrangements really develop over time in response to our experiences. Our day in and day out activities, of course, are responding to fires and things like the cave-in that we had summer before last here on the Cape. We have about 200 volunteers. Of that, a portion are also available to respond to disasters elsewhere over in the state and even in the United States. We're all hearing in the news about the floods that are coming down the Mississippi. Believe me, we will be sending people from this area out to help there, as we did with the tornadoes, as we did with the ice storms in northern Massachusetts. And of course, this week with the tragedy at the marathon, we really were out in full force. There were a total of over 230, I believe, volunteers, Red Cross volunteers, who were involved before, during, and after the marathon, doing a myriad, a number of activities. 75% of them were from Eastern Massachusetts. We're part of the Eastern Massachusetts region, even though we are a separate chapter. We had people all along the route of the marathon. We had set up we were involved in the emergency center, which is at the bunker in Framingham in advance of the event, should anything happen. And of course, you hope things don't happen, but as soon as they do, everything jumps into place. So we had people who were there at the finish line to deal with such things like getting the packs back to the people. They had to drop their bags and they had to be inspected, and then they had to be linked up to the people again. We had family waiting, wondering were the runners okay. The runners were all one way. The spectators were sent somewhere else. We were involved in all of that and continue to be involved in that, include dealing with neighborhood shelters in Watertown when people were asked to evacuate, with mental health counseling that continues and will continue for some time, and follow-up welfare services that we can provide for families who were, of those who were injured or unfortunately killed. So we have a big role to play. We are always looking for volunteers. In order to be a volunteer, you have to take training, and we provide that. It can be provided in place or online. We lose people over the winter. The snowbirds go south and they come back in the summer. Summer is storm season, winter, hurricane season. Winter is our blizzard season. So that in a nutshell is a quick look at what we do, and we do good work.
Thank you very much. At the far end of the table is Donnell Donnery from the Cape Cod Disaster Animal Rescue Team, or CC-DART. Prior to moving to the Cape in 2008, Donnell Donnery was an Army civilian employee where she was director of an environmental natural resources organization at a U.S. Army Superfund cleanup site. So she obviously has extensive experience in emergency responses. In her current position, Donnell is the Cape Cod Disaster Animal Rescue Team representative responsible for shelters at Nauset Regional High School and Cape Cod Tech. She was the DART agency rep for the DY High School shelter during Hurricane Sandy and up at Nauset Regional High School during Nemo. Donnell and her husband live in Orleans. Donnell.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here and talk to you all. One of the things that I wanted to say first is Hurricane Katrina taught us many lessons, but one of the most important was that a lot of people who didn't leave and go to shelters in Katrina didn't go because they couldn't take their pets. Pets are a family member to so many people who do have a pet. And in Cape Cod DART, and our acronym is actually Disaster Animal Response Team. We're not a rescue organization. We don't take in stray animals. We did have one of the Orleans police come in Nauset. They had a lost dog in Orleans, and we would have taken them until we could have gotten them to the animal control officer. But we are not a rescue organization. We are a response team. When there is an emergency, we are to pets what the Red Cross is to people. And we want to provide safe care for all of your animals. And I want to talk for a moment. We are a member of the group that Sean is involved with, the Barnstable County Regional Emergency Planning Commission, and have been for a number of years. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. All of us are volunteers. No one is paid. Most of us as volunteers actually pay for our supplies, but we're very grateful for donations. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, there was a handout I left outside. I hope you picked it up. It was Essentials of Pet Disaster Preparedness, which talks about some things that you can do ahead of time to prepare you and your pet. And on the back side of it, it is a pet emergency go kit list. You should always think about not only if there was an emergency and you couldn't stay in your home, what would you take for a couple days if you had to go to a shelter, but also what would you take for a couple days for your pet to go to the shelter. And while the Red Cross had approximately 200 people in Nauset, we had 27 dogs, cats, and birds. We did, I think, an excellent job. The feedback was very good. And I wanted to talk to you for a minute about when we stand up these emergency shelters, how we do it and what goes into it so you understand. As Sean said, there are 6 regional shelters in the county. Each site has what's called a Connex container. It's like a trailer that you can drop or pick up with a couple of forklifts and move around. And those Connex containers have all the things like the cots and blankets for the Red Cross. And we have things in there such as our crates for the animals, our water bowls, our food bowls. The Red Cross has actually donated used blankets that they weren't going to use anymore to us, and we cut them up and we make them as comforters for the bottom of the crates. We have Stop and Shop gives us little boxes, so they become emergency cat litter boxes that we use. So those supplies are in the Connex container. And for example, during the blizzard of Nemo, the shelter was going to open at 3:30 at Nauset. So at noon, as the buses were pulling out, taking the kids home for the day, we were there setting up with the AmeriCorps volunteers so that we would have all our crates ready and set up. And sure enough, and our president said to me, you know what? You're probably not going to get anybody from Provincetown. It's just too far. And what happened was our first person that came in was from Provincetown. And he came in at 3:31, and he was a person who lived on a boat. He had a beautiful black lab, and he was our first client. And it was a wonderful thing to see everybody come together with the Red Cross, the radio folks, the National Guard, the police, and the firemen. And I think we did an excellent job, but we took good care of all those dogs and cats that were there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donnell. Okay, our remaining panelist obviously isn't here, so we'll start with your questions, and then at the point that Senator Wolf shows up, we'll stop and introduce him and give him a chance to make some comments too. So, as I said before, we have 2 roving microphones. I would ask, if you have a question, put your hand up, wait until one of the microphones finds its way to you, and speak nice and clearly, address your comments to whichever of the panelists is appropriate, or to the entire panel, and we'll take it from there. Who's got a question? There's one there.
Just a question on kind of command, control, and communication. The incidents I think you've described are ones that were contained to a certain degree. Just a question, just some experiences, unfortunately, I've had in the past. I actually was at 3 Mile Island in the emergency command bunker in Pennsylvania when that happened. And the magnitude of the event. I guess that's the question I would have. If there was a large-scale emergency, whether it be, you know, nuclear, or for some reason the transportation link off Cape was cut off, do you do kind of drills around large-scale disaster planning, and how frequently do you do that? I know in Connecticut we had some experience after 9/11. We were all put on alert, and the kind of the reaction was people were really almost stunned at kind of the magnitude of the information that was coming across in terms of casualties and expectations. I was just wondering how often you maybe do like mock disaster drills of a large scale.
Who's the best there to answer that, Sean?
I can take that. We do usually a wide range of drills across the Cape every year. First and foremost, we do an annual hazardous materials response drill. Primarily when you are maintaining your town's and the county's Title III compliance, it's under a regulation called the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act. So annually, we're required, in order to maintain our certification as an emergency planning committee, to conduct a drill every year. So we are able to kind of put things together in that way to look at just what works, what doesn't. And so for this year, we're actually looking at the town of Dennis and doing an exercise there. What we have done in years past is some things such as plane crashes out at Otis Air National Guard Base, some major hazardous material spills over at the Canal Power Plant. Every year we try to pick another venue, and we try to use one of our Tier 2 reporters as a part of it as well. Besides us doing drills, there are also other organizations that do them as well. Just this year we actually had a drill with the Coast Guard regarding a ferry incident out in between Martha's Vineyard and Woods Hole. And what they do is they try to do that with more of a homeland security spin to it. So yes, it's a hazardous materials incident, but also it's a homeland security incident as well. And all of those we try to work, because usually one of the first things that we find a problem with in any type of emergency situation is communications. And one of the most important things is to make sure that those communications links are able to be maintained. And that's interoperable communications with all of the different departments, but also the way that we try to communicate with the folks on the Cape as well. In some plans, we have it outlined. The Cape Cod Traffic Plan has a partnership with WQRC. And then in other ways, we use groups like 211, or as the chief mentioned, using reverse 911 to get those information, or code red in the case of town here, to get that information out to everybody. And the other thing that we do too, and it's important to realize, is, you know, this year we had 2 very major storms affect our area. And we also revisit those events. We don't just pack everything up and say, job well done, and pat each other on the back. We don't do that. We actually do a thing called an after-action report for these types. And quite honestly, you know, if I had to grade us for the last storm, with some of our sheltering things, I think our volunteers were absolutely wonderful. But we did have some deficiencies that we needed to address. And so we try to keep moving forward with that as well.
Good. That answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Other question? One right there.
Thank you. This question, I think, is either for Tony or maybe Sean also. It's probably a twofold question. I'm a member of the CERT team, and for the audience members, CERT stands for Community Emergency Response. And it was a course that I took a number of years ago for the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office. 2 things. Tony, I was wondering, I was under the impression that back then that this was something that maybe the fire department might, you know, like us, you know, to assist in little simple ways. For instance, we've done traffic duty for the Oyster Festival down in Wellfleet and the Scallop Festival down in Bourne. And since I've been on it, no one has really seemed to need us. So I was just wondering if there are some thoughts there. And also, Sean, I have heard some rumors lately that it's going to be disbanded, and I hope that's not the case, but maybe you could address that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll start with the first part of the question. I'm going to pass the rest off to Sean. One of the reasons we looked into CERT heavily back in its inception, and I believe the town sent me to I think it was a 40-hour class to kind of explore that further. What we found out is that it's worked very well in towns like Yarmouth and in Bourne that have larger festivals. Where we were really only deficient at the time when CERT came about was in our sheltering needs. And we have so few responders between the police and fire department that was one thing that drained our resources. And because of the work that Sean has done with his folks, that's no longer an issue. So we were, I think, hesitant to put together a team for Orleans, even though it did work and still tends to work, for instance, in Yarmouth. It's used several times a year at the Seaside Festival and some road races and that kind of thing. And in Orleans, we just simply didn't at the time have the need, and I don't see it in the foreseeable future. We can use volunteers, but I think that as I pass the rest of the question off to Sean, I think that it would be more useful on a countywide basis than the local area.
Thank you, Chief. I have heard rumors that there have been some budget issues at the federal level when it comes to CERT teams, but from my understanding, there is absolutely no discussion of CERT being disbanded for Barnstable County at this point. Honestly, I think a lot of the CERT teams are out there. They're still working together. They're drilling. I know the Barnstable County Sheriff's Department is still very active with their CERT program. And quite honestly, I don't know if we would have made it through this previous blizzard without the assistance of CERT in our shelters, because I know even Red Cross has had an association with CERT for 3 or 4 years, Catherine?
It's been going on for a long time.
To have that assistance there with CERT. So I'm comfortable in saying that I don't see CERT going anywhere. You're one of our partners, one of the volunteer groups that is necessary for us to keep this sheltering program going.
Did that answer your question? Okay. Right there.
Probably like most people, because I'm human, I don't think much about emergencies until they happen. And I probably would not have known much of what you all communicated tonight. Is there any reason, for example, I asked my wife if she knew about shelters, and she said only from the newspaper when they're open. And somebody tells us. Is there any reason for anybody, this is for anybody I guess on the panel, is there any reason for the lack of information? Is there a way to somehow change that over time and communicate to people on the Cape at least a list of telephone numbers to call? I'm not sure. It's an open-ended question, and you may not have a decent answer.
Well, it's a very good question, and I guess let me just say I think the fact that there are 60 or 70 of you here, this is a step in trying to get that information out and what the capabilities are. But who wants to take a run at that one first?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about it because we make a great effort to try to communicate, both in advance of the season, for example, about preparedness for winter storms, preparedness for summer hurricanes, and so forth. We have outreach through the AmeriCorps in the elementary schools. They go out and they give programs to children and hand out literature for them to take home. We, at the county fairs and at other places, we're there with tables trying to distribute information. We have press releases a lot of the time. We have websites. We have Facebook pages, we have a lot of that sort of thing. But obviously, from what you say, it did not reach you, and so it probably did not, these efforts have not reached as many as we thought they did. I mean, the people on the Cape are pretty tough. They tend to stay home. If you move out in a place like this, you know that the bridge closes when it gets to 70 miles an hour, so you sort of hunker down.
I laughed when the evacuation signs went up on mid-Cape. The first place I'd head for is the basement. I certainly wouldn't get on the mid-Cape. On the best of departure days in the summer, there are miles of backup, and we only have 2 bridges.
Yes.
And a tunnel I can't find.
I was going to add that knowing that the sheltering plan is in place, I think is always something we need more communication about. And one of the things that CC DART is doing is we're developing about a 15-minute PowerPoint program that we're going to go out and offer to the Council on Agings across the Cape, and we hope to start that in September. I would probably be the speaker for that. I'm retired. I did a lot of public speaking in my Army position, and it's to tell people a little bit about emergency preparedness. Where are the sick shelters? That there is a county-wide plan that we participate in. And oh, by the way, what do you need to bring if suddenly your house is down below freezing? I mean, I don't know how many people came in during Nemo and said, I just can't take it anymore. It's too cold. I can stand a hurricane. I'm warm, but I cannot take the cold. And that's what brought a lot of people in. And I have to say, I wanted to compliment the fire and police departments, because many of the citizens, by the time they'd been out of power for a day or two and their houses were really cold, the roads were so bad they couldn't travel, so they were calling the police department, and the police did a marvelous job going out and picking up people, even people that had dogs, cats, and birds, and bringing them in, and they got them all home, and they did a great job responding and doing that.
Yeah, I want to second that, because that was done at a scale that was far different from anything else I've been involved with in terms of our sheltering here on the Cape. We would get calls from the various police and fire departments saying, you know, for the people from Brewster, what streets do they live on? Okay, we got the information. Call me back, so we'd call back, and then they would call us in a half hour and say, well, this street is open, we'll be over in 20 minutes. Anybody, will you call out anybody who lives on these streets? They can go back, the power's up, the streets are open, and so forth. And they did that for hours. And that was an amazing support for us in terms of, you know, people realized that they weren't just sitting there waiting for God knows what. You know, all of the responders were working to get them back home and safe and warm.
Can I just add, I think this whole area of how do you know what to do, and more importantly, what services are available should there be any of these different kinds of emergencies. One of you mentioned, I think, that WQRC 99.9 FM is the official
For the Cape
radio distributor for the Cape, so you probably can get a lot of information. Not to say that any of the other radio stations are going to be providing incorrect information, but they are a station you would want to tune to.
If I can add, one of the things that we try to do whenever a storm happens is we bring on board a public information officer. The goal is to make sure that the information is making it out to the radio stations. So we have, what he does is he has press releases that he puts out to all of the radio stations, the Boston television stations, and also over to the newspapers as well. Excuse me. We try to begin that a few days before the storm, so people know where the locations are, and also you can check our website. We keep an up-to-date website and a map, an interactive map going, as long as there's power. But if there isn't power, that's something that may not work, and that's where it's important to make sure that you still have a hardline telephone. And a lot of folks have moved over to you know, to cellular phones, and they don't have that hardline telephone anymore. And what you can do is, if you have any questions, you can always dial 211. And what 211 does is that provides you information. Our public information officer makes sure that anything about our shelters opening up goes to the 211 operator through the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. And if you call that number, you should either get a recorded message or be able to talk to somebody that can give you the specifics of what's going on in Barnstable County. I have left some pamphlets regarding 211 out on the table. I think you know, the chief. I know Chief has asked me to bring them in as well. It's a great opportunity to if there are any questions, it's a great way to get information.
And the only other point that I would reiterate that Chief Mcdonald talked about is get yourself, ensure that your phone lines, and in my case, if I was standing in the house phone would ring and then my cell phone was ringing almost simultaneously, and I'm getting the recording about what's going on, what's the emergency preparedness scenario, you know, what you should do when electricity was supposedly going to be expected back and so forth. So make sure you get signed up for that. Everybody ought to be on that.
King, if I could just add to that. If there is an event, you just want to educate yourself. We are making improvements on our website. So please visit it. Hopefully we'll have it up and running in a few weeks in terms of preparedness. And we'll put this information on there so you have an idea about the shelters beforehand, what you should bring beforehand. So we'd like to have that information to you. Give us a little time and we will get that up and running for you. We can improve and we can do a little bit better there.
There's a question right here. Hold on, he's going to hold the microphone here. Thank you.
I'm Chip Bechtel, Orleans resident. I'm a member of the Medical Reserve Corps, along with my wife Marcia, and also I volunteer at Cape Cod Hospital as a patient advocate, and also as in the emergency room. Only to say that we get around a little bit, and when it comes to shelter, I'm a little bit concerned about where we're going in the future, not just for shelters, but for the aged in our community. I understand, I wasn't at the shelter in Nauset, but I understand there were issues with oxygen for people, issues with people not bringing their medications, behavioral issues, sanitary issues, and I don't mean to be critical to any one of you or any of the people that volunteer in this wonderful community, but I think sometime we should be addressing what the shortcomings are. Now, in Cape Cod Hospital, we were in overflow condition. I think one of the problems was that a nursing home or two, either their generators failed or they didn't have adequate generators. I know that the overflow wards were chock-a-block full of people. The hospital jam-crammed full. I know you had more people in the shelters than you anticipated. And this was just wasn't the worst storm we've had. It could be a lot worse. And there were an awful lot of hurting people on the Cape that didn't get to their shelters or didn't get to the hospital that needed help. And I think this is a very big issue for us. It probably needs a lot more volunteers, a lot more training of people, what to do and when.
I'd like to
I'd
like to talk about that, being at Nauset the whole time. I can assure you that no one was short of oxygen. You know, people came in that had needs, but they were met with the cooperation of the local first responders, but we did not have the kind of medical help that we really needed. We ended up getting an EMT assigned to us on the second and third day, which was really helpful. And that EMT really was willing to do the sort of things, really we look to personal care attendants to provide. And in what we call the hot wash, which is the review afterwards, we've had a lot of discussions about this. One of the suggestions is that really we're going to have to look to other sources for medical, paramedical support than just the MRC. The MRC, for example, was able to send us someone the first day and a half, but after that, they didn't have anybody to send us because, you know, some of the MRC people were in places where they couldn't get to the shelters themselves. So there is a real issue of we're getting people who require more care, people who have personal care attendants at home. We had almost nobody, I think 2 or 3 people that came with the attendants that they would need, okay? A lot of other people obviously needed attendants who weren't there. So one of the things is working with some of the healthcare agencies if they can arrange to send people to the shelters. Because a lot of it was more personal care than medical care. We had a lot of incontinent people. We had supplies for them. But, you know, we as the AmeriCorps volunteers that we had, the Red Cross volunteers, are not necessarily trained to provide that kind of care. And there are health issues involved in this, not just the convenience and comfort of the clients, but also the risk of contamination of the environment. So this is a very serious issue, and it's something that we really have in bold print to work on. This was a real eye-opener this time.
You are absolutely right. We had some concerns. We had some issues pop up. I think the first thing that we realized was in the Sandwich shelter, the first evening that the shelter was open, the average age in that shelter was 92 years old. Wow. And that was, and actually that was the area where we had some issues with generators and oxygen, etc. That facility itself. We've realized that in that storm, we had made provisions for levels of medical equipment to be available when the shelters open. The difficulty was that a lot of people who may have used those pieces of equipment did not bring them with them. And you're absolutely right. We saw some major issues regarding what was happening with people even bringing their own medications in. And that's something that we need to work with is a good education program to remind people that, hey, a shelter is a bed, maybe a blanket, maybe a pillow, and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Oh, a little better than that.
Or a little better than that. but something where you really need to bring what you need in order to make it. Now that being said, we do need to look at the number of volunteers that we have. And, you know, we really need to be out there and we need to look at different ways of trying to engage volunteers, whether it be with CERT, Medical Reserve Corps, Red Cross, DART, whoever. All of those agencies, all of those nonprofit organizations, we need more volunteers. The numbers that we had for this storm, you know, I think the thing that we really realized was that there are reasons why people leave New England when it comes to the winter months. And a lot of our volunteers, at least from the Medical Reserve Corps, I think we had quite a few folks who were on vacation and in Florida. And you know, winters can be harsh here. So we need to look at ways of getting more folks involved. And how do we do that? Well, we need to look at some of the medical organizations that are out there and start talking to them. Quite honestly, this storm really solidified our relationship with Cape Cod Hospital and Cape Cod Healthcare in general. Cape Cod Healthcare and the hospital really came through. In a sense, in some ways, they were able to be a medical shelter for us because a lot of folks that may have had medical conditions were there. Well, we now need to work with the other organizations that are out there as well to see what we can do. What we also need to do is, and we're in the process of developing them, are memorandums of understanding with medical companies, with companies that supply medical equipment. And that way, if we have a pretty good idea that a storm is going to happen, we can have supplies pre-staged at those locations beforehand and have them at each shelter. As a part of just our normal shelter opening. If we use anything, we pay for it, and the understanding is if we don't, it goes back. And whatever we can do in order to enact that, we really need to firm that up along with a very strong education program as well, and a very strong program to try to get more volunteers out there. I think if we can continue working on that and start to bring the people to the shelters, and we have 6 shelters. We have Nauset, we have Cape Cod Tech, Dennis Yarmouth, Barnstable, Sandwich, and Falmouth High Schools, and we have a couple of satellite shelters, one in Buzzards Bay and one in Provincetown. If we can start bolstering up the folks that are there, and you know, and if folks in the audience here, we have sign-in sheets for all of our organizations, whether it be Medical Reserve. Gene Roma made me bring so much for Medical Reserve Corps. Here, please take it, because I don't want to bring it home and it'll be in my car for 2 weeks afterwards.
If we don't have volunteers among you, maybe you know some of your neighbors who would be interested.
We love it.
One of the things I was going to say very quickly to that is the briefing that we have that we're going to be doing at the senior centers, and we talk about this quote go kit for pets, is we also mention that people need to have their own go kit ready. And I believe that some of the seniors that came to the shelters, as one of the gentlemen said in the back, you know, you don't think about it until it's right on top of you. And the idea of a go kit is to have 3 days worth of medicine ready that you would need to go. And I'm sure with the older folks, many of them may have some memory issues, and maybe their caregivers could help them put together a go kit so that their medicines were in a little bag and ready. It's a difficult thing, but it's one of those things that we all need to think about. And think about for us as individuals, our family members, and of course our pets to have that. Chief Whalen, who is on our planning commission, has a saying that I really like to quote, and that is that we should think of shelters not as a cruise ship, but as a lifeboat. And I think that's a very important thing to remember. You know, in thinking of that lifeboat, you need to think of it, you know, it's not a hotel, but what would you take if you were going away for 3 days? And you didn't have access, say, to a restaurant, although the Red Cross feeds us, but, I mean, what would you need? What would you need to take? And those are important.
Bring your knitting, bring your cards, bring your book, you know, that sort of thing.
Joe, there's a question there right behind you. Dan.
Would someone comment on that there's an event at the nuclear power plant up in Pilgrim? What I should be concerned about?
Your neck. That's a major issue, and I think I'll turn that over to someone.
Okay.
Take it away, everyone.
Okay, well, right now, we have, back in October, we dedicated a full meeting of the Emergency Planning Committee to start discussing the nuclear issues that are happening at Pilgrim, and we looked at it as an opportunity to bring the folks from MEMA down and to also discuss with some of our groups, Diane being here tonight, to talk a little bit about what is going on at Pilgrim, but also if there was an incident, what may occur for folks here in the Cape. I think there's a lot of concern that we may have a lot of folks trying to leave the area, and if that occurs, what is going to happen should people try to leave? Now, one of the things that MEMA tells us is we are not part of the emergency planning zone. We are not within that 10-mile limit. We are outside of that. We are within an area that is called the 50-mile IPZ, or ingestion pathway zone. So if there are issues for our area, from what they say to us, it is a shelter-in-place situation. If there is any type of traffic, if folks decide to leave the area, there may be some traffic conflicts when you start to go over the bridge. And it is not a great situation. I mean, we know that trying to empty the Cape with 2 bridges is quite honestly, it is just not an easy situation, even on a holiday weekend, never mind an emergency. And so the concerns that we have been given, and the things that we've been doing as an emergency planning committee, is one of the first things we did is establish a planning group with the Cape Downwinders, also with the Falmouth, there's a group out of Falmouth, which, with the Falmouth group, but also with the, to start discussing some of these issues and work on education strategies for folks here on the Cape of what's going on with the plant. There also has been a push by MEMA to start looking at traffic issues on the Cape and how it may affect with the evacuation of the emergency planning zone as well. So it's kind of something that we're just starting to work on, and I think we're starting okay as a community, as a Cape group, working together on it, but there's still a ways to go.
But to kind of reiterate what you were saying, I think you were asking personally, and did I hear Sean say that if there was an incident because of the 50-mile range, it's a shelter in place?
I know I'm not going to leave the Cape, so is there anybody out there have any suggestions or recommendations how I can prepare for if there's an event?
Okay.
That's what I'm asking.
Okay. It's one of those things where the direction out of the state in that type of a situation is to shelter in place. To prepare for an event, I mean, potassium iodide is something that is available through local boards of health. I hear mixed things in regards to KI, whether it works on folks over 40, I think is the number I've heard. There is some questions about it. Primarily, it's something over the bridge looming. So it makes, you know, primarily if you're looking at doing any type of protection, yeah, it's more or less the shelter in place.
Well, one of the things is, I mean, you should have a week's supply of food, which is standard, quite apart in water. I mean, that's basic for anything.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Has anybody got a bottle of champagne that went alone so we can...
It's a good
Or good scotch.
All right, another question?
One of the things I noticed coming out of Hurricane Sandy, there was a lot of discussion about gas stations that did not have backup generators. They had plenty of fuel, but when the power went out, they had no way of pumping. And there could have been a lot of pain alleviated had people been able to fuel the generators that they had to keep their houses warm and certain things running. Wondering what is being done to address that kind of an issue with some of these gas stations that do not provide backup generation for their own use in situations like that.
I'm not sure, that's a great question. I'm not sure the answer is, you know, among the purview of anybody sitting up here, but unless anybody, if this has come up, I mean, that's an excellent question.
Well, I think there are some stations out there that do that. I think you always have to be really careful with the whole generator thing in general. I spent 2 weeks at Sandy, and I know exactly what you're talking about because I saw it firsthand. I gassed up in Connecticut before I went into the city, and even the lines in Connecticut were absolutely amazing. I think when you're dealing with this area, we may be a little bit more prepared in some of those areas, and I think a lot of our service stations have thought out that way. But you also have to be really careful. What we saw in the blizzard was even problems with just generators we expected to be working all the time anyways. We had generators failing at our shelters. We had generators failing at police stations, fire stations across the Cape. And a lot of that comes down to age. It comes down to, it could even come down to maintenance. It could come down to just, quite honestly, that they were not tested with a load in some ways. So it's good for the service stations to have a generator, but it's also good for them to test it too. It's something that maybe we can try to take up in the future to discuss.
At least bring it out in the open.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question.
The Nauset shelter did lose generator
For a couple of hours.
For a couple of hours.
They got it back up.
And the one thing that I would say is NSTAR has really tried to do a good job. They gave preference on their priorities. My husband and I had gone back to our house for a few hours sleep. We had crew. Our shelter as the Red Cross, we have staff 24 hours a day, as long as that shelter is open with the animals, but some of us do rotate out to go home. When I came back in the morning, about 6 a.m., there had to have been 10 or 12 NSTAR trucks just leaving the high school because they had restored the power. And I understand some of the assisted livings or nursing homes where their generators failed, NSTAR also was giving them priority. I believe we were told too that NSTAR does have some large emergency generators that they can take and put in place if needed. But you're right, service stations can be an issue. How do you get gas?
Additionally for food stores. Yeah.
Yeah, this gentleman's been trying to ask you a question.
Hi, my name is Doug Long from Pine Ridge Lane here in Orleans. I'm a member of Downwinders, which is a citizens group trying to shut down Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant in order that we don't have to worry about traffic control, bottlenecks at the bridge, closing of the bridges, which Kurt Schwartz, the director of MEMA, has told us in October of last year, as Scott mentioned. They will be closing the bridges. If the Bourne Bridge has a bottleneck, then they will also close Sagamore. In any case, they will not allow Cape Cod residents to flee for at least 6 hours so that people from the north can zip by. This is right in his statement, it's right in print, it's very scary, but everyone in this room needs to know that. And you also have a chance to vote on the 21st in the election to vote to have Governor, thank you very much, Governor of Massachusetts to tell the NRC to close Pilgrim. And
you've got a valid point.
I have a question though.
Okay, but I just want to point out that with regard to what we're touching on, the plant's open, and what we're concerned about is what do we do if there's a problem, not taking a position. I mean, this just isn't the right environment to have a debate about whether it should be open or not.
I agree totally, and I apologize for the preface. My question is, how much communications do you get, and I'm talking about to Deputy Pike and Chief Mcdonald primarily, for the town of Orleans, how much communication do you get from the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station or Entergy to help you prepare your town for a radiological emergency? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not aware of any communication that we've had at the police department with the plant.
Yeah, it's the same with the fire department. Most of our communication comes directly from MEMA, and as my colleagues will state, if the wind blows, we get an email from MEMA, we get a text, an email, and so forth, but nothing directly from the power plant.
Thank you.
Bill?
Yeah, Bill Watt, Orleans resident. One thing that was brought up before, and it's the generators and the portable ones, the gasoline ones. And I was talking to somebody that I thought was pretty learned, and is learned, just last week. And he had one, and he said, yeah, I just have my garage door open. And I run it inside the garage. And I said, no. And I think there's got to be more education out there because of negative, I think they call it negative pressure, where it can be sucked back into the house, even though the garage door is open and they have the generator right at the edge. And I think that's a big issue.
Actually, Bill, thank you. I've been waiting for somebody to ask that question. I did bring some information from the State Fire Marshal's office. Using a generator indoors and just opening and cracking open your garage doors is completely inappropriate. It does segue me into the next point, is that one of the problems that we're seeing with both my agency, or our agency, and our partner agency, the police department, is that when people do use portable generators and the power grid is down, that the citizenry automatically assumes that every wire on the ground is dead. And what happens is if your neighbor is using an improperly installed generator will backfeed through the wires with enough energy in the wires out in the street to kill you if you impact those wires. And one of the things that we have that's an inherent difficulty for both of our agencies is the fact that what we'll do is we'll barricade off a street, and we don't have enough personnel to stay at each downed wire area. And then when we go back to those areas, we'll find people driving through them. We'll stop a vehicle and say, well, we have barricades up. How did you get down this street? And they'll say, well, I managed to get around that barricade. Which has happened more than once. And if your car is able to get around the barricade, you're not entitled to drive down the road. So what I did was I brought two things that I wanted to share today. And it's a new program that our agencies are working on together. Our barricades are going to have these signs on them now. And to be a little more explicit, because when the road is barricaded, it means that you can't go down the road because of the hazard. And then we have these tapes. And if you see this tape, please don't go beyond the barricade and stay off that particular road. But I'm glad you said that. If there's ever any question, if anybody goes to the Department of Fire Services website, there's lots of downloadable material, but specifically portable heaters. Unvented portable heaters are a complete no-no and very dangerous. And one of the things that I wanted to stress, and I'm glad you asked this and not to monopolize the time, but prior to an emergency, it's very important that we make sure that we have fresh smoke detector batteries, and also our carbon monoxide detectors are changed. Because what happens is the power goes out, and then 3 days later the battery gives way on those devices, because even though they're plugged into the wall, the battery's not charging. And it's a tremendous drain on our available resources to have to go to, some of them during the blizzards, we do maybe 10 a day with batteries that are beeping. So if we all can, we're all partners in this room, every last one of us in natural disasters. So if we can change our batteries in those devices beforehand, it's a tremendous help.
Very good point. Pat, John, we got a
Quick question.
microphone, please.
There we go. Just building on the generators, many of us after the December 9th storm bought full whole house generators that were tested. And would it be feasible that if a house, say, I'm willing to take in a couple people in a case of an emergency or a winter storm, register your house, and then somebody from your department could call and say, how many can you take and what capabilities can you handle? It would maybe relieve some of the centers from handling the low maintenance people.
I think that's an excellent idea. It's really a great idea, and I think that I would prefer to handle that at a local level, where we could manage that program at EEOC, and I think it's a fabulous idea.
It's a great idea.
One of my best friends, her husband owns Coney Island Amusement Park in Brooklyn, and as I was driving back from DY Monday night of Sandy, I called her to see how they were, and it was about a half hour before the ocean water came down their street and just demolished their cars and everything. But they had a whole house generator, and what I was going to say is, she said she took in people, she had no idea who they were. She said, you know, in an emergency you do it. She said, I think they had 11 dogs, cats, and a couple of rabbits that came in. And the nice thing is, if you have a whole house generator, is everybody can see you have power and you're very popular. So it would be nice to have something like that. But like all her neighbors found her in that because their house had power.
We do see a lot of that happening on its own, just so you know. Neighbors being neighborly, taking in their neighbors. And in the last storm, we saw a lot of that.
We got the storm-induced ad hoc cocktail party in the
Yes.
But John's got a great idea. I mean, if he's got the capability to somehow get that point out.
I just added, they bring a bottle of wine and
They could stay forever, right? Pat?
You're talking about the high voltage, those those new signs, and you're talking about the pets and all these, and you have a program to go to the Council on Aging. I think it would be great if the fire department, the police department, and the emergency preparedness could put together some shows for channel 17 and 18. I know they're filming this now, but if you could put together instructions on how to make a go kit, and instead of people having to go to a website, because a lot of our residents are seniors and they do not do that.
Right.
But if they had a TV show that they could watch with their caregiver on step-by-step how to do it, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, we did some, the Red Cross was involved in something like that 5 or 6 years ago. Unfortunately, it was broadcast at like 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning. You know, it's got to be a little more better.
Yeah, but you could put things together.
Microphone, please.
You could use the code red to inform people when they should watch it, when it would be on.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Excellent idea. Other question? Right over here. Okay, one second. Back there.
I'm Hillary Green. I actually work for the Red Cross too. Great job, Catherine. Thank you. But a while ago, we brought the point. Somebody said it wasn't. We've had worse storms, and I was at the Red Cross chapter house, and we have a generator, and it had just been serviced, and it went down. It was a very dangerous storm. It was the wind and the mix of the snow. It just took out. I mean, again, 2 of our 3 shelters at one point were without generators, so it was an unusual storm. I'm pretty sure. 2005, we had more snow, but less wind. So the thing about a generator, I mean, I came to stay at the chapter house because I thought, well, my house always loses power, so I'm staying at the chapter house. And the chapter house generator went down. So there are certain things that no matter what you do, we just had it serviced. And we're like, we just paid you all this money to make sure it's running. But it took out a lot of things that we just, though we felt we were prepared, sometimes a generator just doesn't do it, so we need to be prepared for what if you continue to lose power. And that's what our shelters did. They were able to work together on that. And then the other point is that it's not just preschools that the Red Cross does and AmeriCorps does education. We do the senior centers, we do it. It's something we're going to actually increase the amount of community education we do because it is so important, but we do it from preschools up to senior centers to high schools because you just can't tell the story enough. We have tried TV and whatever, and we'll continue. Whatever you can tell us to do, we'll do, because it's just getting the word out. And you're right, nobody listens until, oh my God, the storm's coming. So I'm guilty of it too. You know, I just got a go kit recently. So.
Okay. Thank you. There was a question right up here, Joe. Thank you.
Hi. First, I want to just thank you, first responders. You're our heroes, and you deserve all of our gratitude for all that you do. Thank you. Thank you. And I came here tonight because originally the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station was on the list of discussions tonight. And I'm Diane Turner with Cape Town Winders. And Director of MEMA, Kurt Schwartz, did speak in Harwich in October, and I have to thank him for his honesty. Because what he shared with us is that there is a plan for Cape Codders. The 10-mile emergency planning zone around the Plymouth reactor is planned and paid for by Entergy Corporation under the obligation to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Outside of that is a 50-mile ingestion pathway zone, as Sean had said. But that's the obligation of the state to make those plans up. There are plans for people on Cape Cod, and Kurt Schwartz said that what's going to happen is the Sagamore Bridge will be closed because they have to evacuate the people in Plymouth, and that the Bourne Bridge will probably be closed because if there's a bottleneck, they're going to close it because they have to get all those folks out from Plymouth area. The worst place to be is in your car because of radioactive material, there's no protection in a car. So the worst thing for Cape Codders to do is to get in their car. But the shelter in place is almost as bad. On the MEMA website it says that even sheltering in place only provides 10% protection. So this is all about a corporation making profits at our expense. I want to know if you guys think this is an appropriate safety plan for the citizens of Cape Cod, considering that the NRC asked 50 miles around Fukushima to evacuate. And Kurt Schwartz did say too that after we take the radiation hit, that teams would come down from the state and determine where the hot spots are and relocate people and their pets, and that just like Fukushima, people wouldn't be able to return for a very long time. And I think we all love this planet here, and I want to know if you think that's an appropriate plan for the citizens of Cape Cod. Thank you for your time.
Well, I appreciate your kind words, and I appreciate your passion on this issue, but I'm not going to respond to that, respectfully.
We live with our geography. We are fairly unique. I had the experience once of being on the Outer Banks and having to be evacuated for a hurricane. And I was only about 1.5 miles from the causeway, and it took 6 hours to get across that causeway. So evacuation is, something I've experienced.
I think in response to what you said, Diane, I think what's important is that we've looked at this and we're reacting to it. So I think our reaction actually is our answer. Is what we're doing as a committee, and we're starting to look at the issues and look at the education that's out there. So I think anything that we're looking to do is to add to whatever plan is out there from the state, and we realize that we need to be a part of it as well.
But there are some very challenging physical impediments, obviously. Yes, ma'am. Wait a minute, hold on, he's coming with the microphone.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to the sheltering issue and volunteers, because I was a little confused about who your volunteers are and how they're trained. Is it just for sheltering, or are they all Red Cross volunteers and then are used at the shelters? And where do you sign up?
Okay, Red Cross volunteers can be trained in for many areas. They select the areas they want to be trained in. Basically, everyone who comes in as a volunteer gets shelter training, and then you go from there. Okay, but the shelters are not exclusively staffed by Red Cross. We have AmeriCorps, and we have, for example, at our chapter house, we have 2 AmeriCorps who come. They come for 10 months out of the year. But there are a total of, how many? 20-some
on the Cape.
On the Cape total. And they are all made available. I mean, some of them work for the National Seashore, for the, the whatever. They all
Does everybody
show up.
know what AmeriCorps is?
It's a volunteer group. So they basically set up and break down our shelters and then do anything else that we want them to do while they're there. But they're young, they're healthy, they're strong. A lot of us may be smart, but we're not very strong. Okay. So they do that. And when you're packing up, you have to sanitize the cot. So it's not just, oh, we'll fold it up and put it away. It's all got to be done. So they support us. The MRC supports us. In some of the places, CERT supports. Okay, the DART supports. Okay, and we actually can make use at the shelter of shelter residents if they're able and willing. There's certain things that they can do. They can't deal with confidential information and that sort of thing, but they can help people get back and forth to the bathroom, back and forth to the cafeterias, all sorts of things, like get a group of children to play and all of those sorts of things. We also can get volunteers from out of the area, which we did finally on the last day of the shelters. We had people come in from other parts of New England to assist us as we go to assist people in other parts when they need it. But what really struck in this last time was the number of elderly and infirm people who needed a lot of care and attention. Now, I was there when people arrived and I was there when people left. And I was amazed, people that were going out saying, gee, this wasn't so bad as I thought it was, and thank you so much, and all of that. We were running around crazy trying to, deal with situations, but the general atmosphere was that people seemed very content. I had no complaints from any of those. I think it was exactly 186 people. Never had a complaint about what was happening while I was there. They really appreciated what was done. We had to send 2 people off to the hospital. There were definitely more than we could deal with. But that's when in our after action plan, some things got to change. We need more caregivers. We could set up the beds, we could feed the people, we could do that sort of thing, but the personal care element is needed with that population.
And on Cape Cod DART, and each of our organizations are our own entity. Red Cross is an entity, CERT is an entity, the Medical Reserve Corps is an entity, and CC DART is an entity, a separate entity. We always need volunteers. In fact, Chief Whalen has talked about in future emergencies, we'll open 6 shelters, all 6 of them. Right now, we're going through a training program. We have an 8-week training program of 3 hours a night that we train volunteers to. And we run those once or twice a year, ending with an exercise. We do a full shelter exercise. We go to the Barnstable firehouse and we set up a whole shelter. We bring in dogs. We do the whole thing, cats. So we run those a couple times a year. Honestly, if there was an event tomorrow, we probably couldn't open all 6 shelters because we don't have enough volunteers. And as you just heard, we take people that we call emergent volunteers. If they're at the shelter, if they're willing to help, they can do things like escort clients back and forth and things like that. But we each do our own training, and we're each our own organization, and we desperately need volunteers, and we're very happy when we get volunteers.
If some of us either wanted to personally be volunteers or know of other people in that younger category you were talking about, that want to be volunteers locally here within Orleans, let's say, what's the best way to make that known? To funnel it through you, Chief Pike, or, you know, depending, or how's the best way to?
Yeah, you could just call me directly at the station, and we can make sure we give you information and we'll proceed.
Pass the information along to
Absolutely.
whatever organization.
And Red Cross is in the phone book, and we also have websites, and redcross.org will walk you right through it.
And Cape Cod Medical Reserve Corps actually has their own website as well. What's kind of neat about the Medical Reserve Corps is it's not just, you do not have to be in the medical field. We have both clinical and non-clinical volunteers that participate with the organization. But not only that, it's an organization that may be also more involved during other times as well. Back during 2010 and 2009, when we had a pretty good flu season, we used Medical Reserve Corps volunteers at town flu clinics. Yep, and it wasn't just for giving the shot. It may have been for, you know, supporting that whole clinic facility itself, parking attendants, whatever we could use. We had people involved. So there are a lot of opportunities, and we also see our Medical Reserve Corps folks and Red Cross folks too at planned events.
Joe?
So that works out.
We need 30 seconds to change the tape.
Okay, now a word.
Selection candidates will be there. You'll be able to answer questions. The first third of the meeting will be on general town topics, and the last 2/3 of the meeting are going to be on wastewater, which should be very interesting. So we advise everybody to put that on their calendar and come again next Tuesday night at 6:30. But this meeting is not going to be here. It's going to be at the middle school auditorium, not the basketball court, but the auditorium on the town side of the building. So we'll have people to direct you to the right doorway so you can get in. But it should be very interesting, and it's a very comfortable venue. It's going to be a fairly long meeting. Anyway, put it on your calendar, and we hope to see all of you again next Tuesday night. Thank you.
Cape Cod DART has a website and a Facebook page, which I printed on the bottom of the little handout, but I wanted to say that just as the Red Cross was experiencing people who needed caregivers, one of the things we do with CC DART, when people bring in their animals, we do ask them to care for their own pets. We're there to make sure that the shelter is safe, that everything runs the way it should be, and we have check sheets that people are coming down, walking their pets or changing kitty litter, feeding them, etc. And we watch that in case they're not coming down. But what we experienced in the blizzard was that many of the people who had pets were so elderly and had mobility issues, and it was a huge distance from where the Red Cross was down to the pottery lab where we had the pets, that they weren't able to come down and take care of them. We're okay with that. The owners can, on the form, say they surrender the pet to our care, and we take care of them. But what that also means is we need more volunteers then, because if we're taking care of 27 dogs, cats, and birds, and walking them and feeding them and changing the kitty litter, it takes more volunteers, because typically most clients are able to take care of their pets.
Very good. Another question?
Hi, I'm Don Cameron, Orleans resident. Just a follow-up to the point that was made by a couple of people about the equivalent of a 3 Mile Island event and the question about the appropriateness of the plan. It seems to me there really isn't a plan for the safety of the Cape people right now. I understand your reluctance to respond to that. But just compare it with the situation for the plans that you have for a blizzard. The equivalent of the lack of a pilgrim plan with a blizzard situation would be to tell people that all you have to do in a blizzard is to stay inside your house. You're not going to get any help. You may die of cold because your car may be out and you may not have a generator. You may not be able to get meds. You may not be able to get oxygen. This is hardly a plan. And that's what we're faced with in the case of a nuclear emergency. So, not so much to make a political statement about closing down Pilgrim, but I would urge everybody to be educated about the risk that we're all facing here, because there really is no plan. And Sean, with respect, I think your hands are tied when you talk about educating people. All you're able to do is to educate people as to the inadequacy of the non-existent plan.
Thank you. Other question? Carl, welcome. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't have a question.
Nick first.
But I want to take this opportunity to congratulate the 5 of you, all 5 of you. I've never got so much information as you had. By the way, I am a high school graduate, so it was difficult for me. Thank you very much.
One comment I'd like to make about the previous gentleman, you know, radiation is a different order of magnitude than anything we're dealing with. I think the only thing that I could say would be comparable would be a major epidemic. And we have had drills about major epidemics. The same sort of thing that's really in control, and the question of, do you let people enter the Cape? If there's an epidemic across, you know, in the mainland, and we don't have it yet here, what do you do? And the answer is simply, yes, we probably have to do that. You know, so these are really cosmic issues.
Joe, Carl, had a question on that.
This is probably addressed to Tony. We've talked a lot about generators tonight, and I think it's a really important subject. King and I both have generators that start by themselves, and if one of us was not in town...
And everybody's welcome to come over.
The other guy goes over and checks his generator. But my point is that I agree with what was stated, I think, by Tony, that there's a lot of generators that people go to Home Depot, buy one, hook it up themselves, and really get into a lot of trouble. And if anybody's considering putting in a generator, I would strongly recommend spend 3 times as much money. Yeah, probably going to be $6,000, but it's approved by the building officials. It runs properly. The new ones test themselves every week. If they're not working right, they tell you. But I think it's just a good idea. And set up a hierarchy of what you want running in your house. But Tony may have more.
You know, and you bring up a great point, and I'm glad you did. And the bottom line is licensed professionals for installation. We can't tell you who to use, but to buy a decent generator, get some advice before you shop, do your research, and get an adequately sized generator. I'll give you an idea. We were sitting in your town's fire facility about a year ago, and we decided, you know, we've lived in this building for 25 years, which would suggest that the emergency generator is 25 years old. And we decided that if we had a car that was 25 years old and we relied on that to respond to emergencies, it wouldn't be fair to the taxpayers. And we've gone through a painstaking process to not only upgrade our electric generating capabilities, and believe me, this is circuitous, so bear with me. The generator that we installed in the firehouse originally only took care of half of the firehouse. and it didn't power the air conditioner. Well, we got a grant for hurricane shutters. So we encapsulated the whole building with hurricane shutters with no air conditioning. Hence the brand new generator. Well, you bring up a good point. Licensed professional, do your homework and make sure that you choose and have it installed. Particularly, I think where we run into problems is where, like you say, somebody will go to a big box retailer, buy a generator, and then a friend will help bypass some things in the fuse box, fuse box, and say, well, let's just do this, this, and this. But I can't stress enough is seek information from both from our town hall, building department, electrical inspector, certainly our agency, and also the internet before you buy. But thank you very much for that question.
Another question?
Can I clarify one point, please? When I spoke about the flu, that was not conducted by the Red Cross. That was the State Health Department in Boston University, and they've had several other drills since.
Any other questions? I mean, these guys are tremendous, but there's got to be more questions out here. Huh? Going once, going twice. Listen, please join me in thanking what I think is a great job. And if there's still material left on that table out there, I would encourage you to pick it up because there was some great information that they brought along. Thank you all very much for joining us, and don't forget a week.